Hello. So tomorrow is October 7th, and like many people, I have been witness to and struggled with what is happening in Palestine, um, and with the genocide and the conflict, the wars, and I have been at a loss as to what to do beyond protesting and boycotting, donating. There's the obvious things. Um, but I've kind of struggled with my place in this conflict and the action to take in terms of what forms of advocacy I can contribute beyond the commonplace. But this week I had been thinking about some things that I wanted to study for my master's. And there's this one idea that I came across that I was thinking might be relevant to share on the anniversary of October 7th, which, if you don't know, is the date that Hamas came into like an Israeli festival and retaliated against the ongoing occupation of Palestine, and it resulted in the death of thousands of Israelis, and also took hostage some Israeli people. People were assaulted and killed, and in response, the Israeli government has began. Well, there was already a war and conflict, I guess you could say, an occupation, but began an all-out war against Palestine and really against the people of Palestine who didn't have any means to defend themselves. And we're at the point of calling it genocide, and there's starvation happening, there's a lot happening. So it is a humanitarian crisis, to say the least. And it's been very difficult to watch all of this occur and obviously take the actions that you can take, but to know what to do at all is very difficult. It's hard to process, to be honest, alongside all of the other issues of the world, including the Congo and Sudan, which are other, I would say, topics that are circling Palestine. So I wanted to contribute this idea, this thought process that I've been thinking through, because I think it's helpful and it has to do with truth. So I believe in this thing, which I don't know how original of an idea this is. This might be actually very commonplace. But I believe in truth frameworks, personal truth frameworks. And I believe that there are standard truths that we accept about society and about life and about the world, either because they help hold up a certain moral standard or they help us understand the life that we're living in, like the reality of our physical world. There are scientific truths, there are moral truths that we accept, that we uphold. And then we have personal truths that we all have within us. And these personal truths are very responsive to our life, to our environment, to history, to culture, to our experiences in the world, and to other people's experiences. And our truths, our personal truth framework is constantly shifting and adapting to respond to the needs of the world and the needs of ourselves, of our egos, of our hearts, of our bodies. And as you heal and as you begin to build a strong relationship with yourself, your personal truth framework can evolve to be responsive in a way that is empowering, that is engaging, especially engaging your critical thinking, your ability to develop empathy, your ability to build understanding, build community, and also build self-protection, and have proper boundaries. So yeah, this idea of truth is a lot more flexible than, the scientific truths or the moral truths, the certain moral truths that we all kind of agree on within humanity. And I wanted to bring this up today because I think that the issue of Palestine is a great example of where truth becomes really complicated based off of the experiences you've had in your life, especially because the issue of Palestine and between Palestine and Israel, these are both groups of people who have faced horrific systemic oppression and racism. They have faced, the hands of white supremacy. And I guess you could say capitalism and maybe colonialism is maybe a better word, but maybe also capitalism. Because I feel like I remember learning in history class that Hitler was also very triggered by Jewish people's ability to create their own financial community and their own financial success. And the financial success of Jewish communities was wielded as a weapon, an anti-Semitic weapon. So perhaps capitalism also does have a place in that conversation. But we're dealing with two groups who have been traumatized and who have had to, whose truths are constantly having to respond to the world they are engaging with, a world that has historically been very violent towards them. And from Israel's perspective, we are dealing with a nation, a government more so, that is projecting a certain truth that is meant to wash over this entire group of people. Though there are many Israelis who do not agree with what the Israeli government has done, who do not agree with the war. And we're dealing with a government that is weaponizing the truth and the trauma of their people in order to justify fear and fear-based violence to suppress Palestine and Palestinians. And this is all information that I have from an outside perspective. I'm not supremely educated on this topic. I don't know all the nooks and crannies and the nuances. But from my perspective, what I see is a government power, a military power, and perhaps also some wealthy people from even outside of Israel who are invested in Jewish people feeling unsafe in the world, Jewish people not being accepted and continuing to be alienated, and invested in that vulnerability being used against Palestinians to also ensure that they don't feel safe in the world and that there is no place for them in the world. And I see two very, very vulnerable groups of people basically being used to fund a war that seems to be aimed at greed, at being able to exercise greed and power to whatever ends. I'm really not quite sure what could be worth this kind of loss, but perhaps there's something. Maybe it's resources, maybe it's development, I don't know. It's really hard to justify in terms of just trying to figure out what could make this all worth it. But I was thinking a lot about truth, because I think that in terms of amongst us regular people, us working class, regular human beings, not the super powerful, but just all of us folks, what continues to keep us divided on these things that seem to be clear cut in terms of what's actually happening. And I think that personal truth and personal trauma, experiences of trauma, and how history has handled our trauma, how society has handled our trauma and traumatic experiences, I think that has a lot to do with it. And I think that the defensiveness that we see from some Israeli people who are not who don't feel comfortable standing against the Israeli government and the argument that, you know, Jewish people are not safe and that anti-Semitism makes it so that, you know, Jewish people can only really rely on themselves and they need a safe space in the world. And there is no safe space beyond Israel or the land that Israel is on. I completely understand that argument. And I completely understand that feeling. And I think that what is helpful or important to remember is that that's not untrue. You know, what the Holocaust did, and I'm sure that there was more happening before the Holocaust, but like I said, I don't know all the information. But anti-Semitism is a major, major issue in our world. And we can see how big of an issue it is by the way that it has become so easily acceptable to group all Israelis together, all Jewish people together, to spew out anti-Semitism, to spew out violence against Jewish people, due to this understanding that you are morally in the right to basically attack the Jewish community. So it is true that it is not, we don't have a particularly safe world for Jewish people. It's also true, I think, that the Israeli government is abusing its people's vulnerability, its people's emotional trauma, traumatic history, in order to continue this war and justify this war. And when I think about what we can do to help people find a place to land and find a place of unity to understand, to get on the same page about this issue, is holding space for people's experiences and how that informs the way they think and the way they feel, and not denying their experiences. You don't have to deny that Jewish people face violence, that Jewish people are not safe in the world. You don't have to deny that truth in order to get to a point where we can call what is happening in Palestine, what is happening to Palestinians, a genocide. You know, both can exist at the same time, and they do exist at the same time. And truth is responsive. I wonder how much more quickly we would get to a place where there is total alignment, at least amongst the regular human beings on this planet, the regular folks, the working people. How easily we would get to a place of alignment on this topic if we were to acknowledge the truth of what Israeli people who are struggling to get across that line, what are they fearful of? What are they afraid of? What are they feeling unheard about? If we can acknowledge that truth and respond to that truth with empathy, I wonder if it would bring us to the table in a way that begins the conversation at a place of agreement rather than at a place of trying to convince, or at a place of trying to argue or dominate, right? Because there's already a war happening. We don't need to bring that level of conflict and hostility into our conversations. And it hurts no one, I think, to acknowledge other people's pain. And if you have the capacity to do that, I think you should, because that is the radical act of advocacy that you can do during this time of war. What we all need to be doing is everything we can to make it so that the conflict that is existing within our daily lives we can address. And that means conflict between you and me, and conflict between myself and somebody online or somebody across the world. You know, an argument, a disagreement that we might have, when we can find common ground, it improves the ability to find peace as a whole. You know, it starts with individual action. And so if you can hold empathy and make your truth responsive to somebody else's experiences, it makes it easier to get to that point of agreement. And I would say that perhaps for some people who are not understanding why this is being called a genocide and are really struggling with that role, if you can understand the perspective of us, having to witness from an outside perspective, hundreds of thousands of people at this point have been killed, civilians. These aren't people who are soldiers who have signed up for anything. These are regular people, regular everyday people being killed, trying to understand why you would have to justify not allowing aid to come in, even just like through these random, human projects, like the flotilla. I think that's what it's called, flotilla. Why block that? I've seen the questions come in are just around why is this action being taken? Why is it affecting the regular everyday people? If this is just meant to address violence, why is it hitting civilians more than anything else, more than anyone else? If you can understand why those questions are being asked, and instead of responding to them with your argument, but instead understanding how that raises an alarm for a humanitarian crisis, then we can again get to the table to start at a place of agreement and build off of agreement rather than conflict, rather than arguments, rather than struggle. Because I don't see why anyone would want this war to continue, from the Israeli side of people who support the war right now, and then obviously from people who are calling this a genocide. I don't see the benefit of the war going on in any way on either side. For Israeli people, it's building a really, really strong sentiment of anti-Semitism in the world, which is not beneficial to anyone, but especially not to the Jewish community. It is creating a lot of hostility and just a struggle for connection. And it is overblowing like a feeling of being disconnected from each other in society, which is also being aided by the media. And then obviously from the genocide perspective, you don't want people to keep dying. You don't want people to be starving. You don't want people to be displaced from their homes, so no regular person that I know wants this war to continue on, no matter what side they're on. And so we all have this desire to come to a place of agreement around peace, seeking out peace. And so how can we find peace during this time? I think it starts with hearing and listening to each other's truths and not arguing or debating, just listening and responding, making our truth responsive to their truth by saying, I hear you, I see you, I understand you. I know what you're saying is true. I know that this is true. I know that this is true for you. And because I know that this is true for you and we live in this same world together, I can see how this could be true for me too. Let's see where the conversation can go now that we agree on this one truth. What else can we find to agree on? How else can we work through this struggle? Because, we don't have to leave it up to our governments. We can come to a place of agreement as a people and make decisions from that place. These governments are just people that we put in power, and they're very, very powerful, and they have a lot more resources than we do. But the power of the people cannot be underestimated. It really cannot be underestimated. It's the reason why we have everything that we have in this world, because people are powerful, especially when we work together and we find agreement. And during this time, and as this anniversary comes back around, I know there is going to be a lot of push, I think, from media and from government to intensify conflict and disagreement amongst us all, and argue that there are irreconcilable truths. But I don't believe that. I think that we can come to a common truth, a shared truth, and that my truth can respond to your truth with empathy and as a witness to that, to the existence of how you feel and the validity of how you feel and how that informs your frame of the world. And that can be real, that can be true, that can be authentic, that can be honest, and so can my take on things. And when that idea comes together, it builds a collaborative truth of empathy, of shared humanity. And moving from that place will always be better than moving from a place where we can't see each other, we can't speak to each other, we can't understand each other, we can't know each other. And I think that's one of the ways we're going to heal and move beyond what is happening right now. It is when we are able to come to a place, a shared, safe space of letting the arguments wall down and the conflict wall down, and being vulnerable enough to say, I want to understand, I want to know how you feel, I want to share this space with you and try to build something together. Let me hear you out. And I know a lot of people are already doing this and have been doing this from the beginning, so I'm not saying that I'm suggesting anything radically new. It's just one thing I thought I could share. I was thinking about this week, and I thought I would contribute it during this time to try and spread something helpful online as we circle back around this really traumatic anniversary. And I'm, for those who are going to be experiencing the emotions of this really, really deeply, and perhaps are in spaces where it's going to, without a doubt, create conflict and stress and trauma. And then for those living actively in the war zone, living actively through the genocide, what more can I say beyond that my heart is with you? And I do really hope that you know that essentially the entire world at this point is breathing for Palestine, and our hearts are all beating for Palestine. It is really, really hard. I haven't really come across anyone in real life who is not thinking about Palestine, and I think that is a major testament. I also want to say I have not come across anyone in real life. I have not had any real life conversations with anyone who is anti-Semitic, anyone who wants Jewish people to feel unsafe. I have not come across that in real life either. So in real life, talking with real people, real human beings, not people online who we're not sure if they're even people, bots are real and they're advanced. Real people I've witnessed more than anything else want peace, want healing, want community, want justice, and acknowledge that there are several complex truths happening at the same time, and acknowledge the need for safe space to have conversation, safe space to find understanding, and acknowledge the need for empathy through this all. And I'm one of those people, and I want to just share this thing I was thinking about and offer my heart and my condolences, and just another reminder amongst the many that this is not being experienced in isolation. This is an experience that the entire world is taking on, and we'll continue to hold it for as long as we need to, and find ways to heal the hurt. So yeah, this is my contribution. I hope that if I said anything that didn't land well, that you can understand that I have no intention of hurting or misspeaking or trying to say anything destructive. Been trying to actually be very watchful of my words while doing this, and I felt quite stupid during multiple parts of this. Not quite sure what I'm even talking about, but I'm hoping it has some type of effect. And I mean, at this point, you just do what you can. So yeah, please take everything I'm saying with grace and understanding that I have the best of intentions. So if I misspeak, it was not on purpose. And yeah,